Valve is making a Steam home console. They obviously toyed with this a while back, about 10 years ago or so. But there's rumors now that they are once again looking at making some sort of box home console machine, perhaps following the success or relative success of the Steam Deck, which is really funny if it's true, because it's like everyone else is talking about getting out of making consoles for PC because of PC gaming, and then Valve is seeing an opportunity, maybe, I don't know, because of their big library. What do you any thoughts on this? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's a good idea if it is?
I think they definitely have a leg up on a lot of these other consoles just because of the legacy that Steam has on PC. And if they could make a nice console that is a little cheaper, they've also just been pushing compatibility with their accounts for forever. So it's just seamless. I mean, I think Xbox is pretty much there at this point as well. I'm not quite sure how Sony is. I know it's a little bit like more convoluted, kind of, if I remember correctly. But I mean, they just have the legacy of, you have your Steam account, you have all your games, they all still work. You all still just have them in that one place. And that's the only reason I think that this could be true, because people would buy it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons why this is true. First of all, like, if you guys haven't, or if you don't follow like Valve leakers on YouTube, I really recommend you look into some of that stuff, because every time like a new version of Source is updated or something, people comb through the data in order to like find clues about what might be coming next. And there are tons of breadcrumbs that you can follow that pretty much confirm that they're working on new hardware and confirm they're working on new things for Half-Life 3 and all this different kind of stuff. It's actually a pretty fascinating rabbit hole to dive into if you ever feel like doing that kind of thing on YouTube. But, you know, this is one of several new pieces of hardware that has been rumored to be coming from Valve. You know, one is also the Deckard, which is meant to be their next VR headset, which I think a lot of people are assuming is going to be another standalone headset to kind of go alongside, you know, the Meta Quest, which I think is a great direction for them to go into, kind of like the Steam Deck of VR. That sounds really fascinating and interesting to me. That might get me back into VR personally, just knowing how well they handled the Steam Deck. But, you know, just a couple of the things about this. I think, you know, Valve, they are happy to put out hardware. And even if they take a loss on it, and even if it doesn't sell a ton of units, it doesn't really matter to them, because they're making all their money from the Steam store, you know? So like, they're happy to see like all these handheld PCs blowing up right now, because it just means more platforms for people to buy Steam games. You know what I mean? And so every Steam game sold, they're getting a cut from, right? So them undercutting everybody with cheap hardware that they're taking a loss on, that's like, they don't really give a shit about that, right? They just like seeing the whole momentum moving forward of people following suit on what they're doing, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, like, you know, getting more people who are in the console space on Steam buying games, who then think maybe a couple of years later, I don't want a console, now I want a PC. And, you know, or that might convince people to do that, or
yeah. Or like, you know, if it's been kind of toyed around of like them putting Steam on like Xbox Series X's, you know, like they've talked about that in the past. And Valve would love that. You know what I mean? Obviously, I don't know why Microsoft would do that, but still, I mean, you know, that kind of thing would be really great for them. And I think that's obviously where they're trying to move going forward. And I think the other thing I wanted to say is, you know, a lot of people have been talking, and you brought it up, Patrick, about Steam machines, you know, and that was about almost 10 years ago that they announced that. And they even brought that up recently, that next year will be the 10-year anniversary of them announcing the Steam machines. I think that those failed back then because they were Linux boxes and there was no Proton, right? Like back then they were like, hey, we're putting out these Steam machines. They all run Linux, and I know most games run on Windows, so please make Linux ports of your games. And game developers were like, no, we're not going to do that. Nobody's buying Steam machines, so we're not going to like spend all the time and resources. But since then, we're in a different world now. You know, like Steam Deck runs on Linux, but they built their own compatibility layer to run Windows games flawlessly, right? So we're in a totally different world right now, to where if they put a bunch of money into a set-top box, like an actual console that sits under your TV, and it costs the same amount as a Steam Deck, but they put that extra money towards making it more powerful, making it run more modern games. And it doesn't have to, have an OLED screen and have all this stuff that makes it like usable as a handheld console. I think they do a lot better this go around, and people would actually buy these things to kind of go alongside their Steam Deck, right? So either way, I think it's an interesting time, and I can't wait to see what they do with hardware, because whenever Valve actually puts their mind towards hardware, I think they do some really interesting stuff.